Our pre- All right, let's begin our pre-meeting, which is a review of the classification and compensation study. I'll give you the floor.
Commissioners, tonight we have Rob Williamson here with Evergreen Solutions to review the classification and compensation study, give an overview and results of that study. Just a quick history, we asked for approval to do a comprehensive study last year to address what we felt like was a rapidly changing market and try to get all of our positions reviewed at the same time versus what we had been doing with a third, trying to catch up so that we were looking at them all at the same time, try to make sure that we were in a good position moving forward. So that's what we've done here, and hope that the recommendations will get us in a good spot to be able to continue to retain and recruit people. With that, I will turn it over to Rob.
Good afternoon. So I'll address the semi-large elephant that's in the room. If you're wondering what's going on with my eye, I apologize that you have to look at this, and I hope your eyes are not watering by looking at this, but about 3 days ago, I started to have some issues with my vision. I go in and they tell me I have a partially torn retina. So they did like this emergency laser procedure. So there's no pain, everything feels good, but it looks like no bueno. So I'm sorry for that, but we'll just move right on, right? We'll just pretend that way you won't spend the whole time going, wow, what does the other guy look like, right? So look, it is awesome to be back here. I spent some time in this room not too many months ago talking to your team and doing outreach sessions and focus group sessions, and I got to learn a lot about what's going on here. And you know, having the opportunity to work with your team along the way, I have to tell you, right now, I think I'm project manager for around 40 different engagements in 12 states. All right, so I get the chance to work with a lot of cities and counties, and I get the chance to work with a lot of staffs. So I'm gonna brag on you a little bit right now, okay? You've got a heck of a team here. You really do, okay? I have some entities that I go to that, you know, it's a struggle. And here, very responsive. They genuinely care about the folks that they work with. And it was very important to them that the amount of money that they bring home to their families, that we got that right. And so they challenged us all along the way. They asked a lot of really good questions, and I just wanted to share that with you. So I think we've got a presentation that'll take me about, 15 minutes to get through. And basically you hired us to do some stuff, right? So now we want to tell you what stuff that we did. So, the agenda, we're going to cover some stuff, so we'll just go on past that. The purpose, all right, so what were we trying to accomplish together? We wanted to get to a fair and competitive pay plan. And we had heard that competitive pay was vitally important. So if we're going to prioritize something as a result of this study, it was, where do we stand to market? Are we competitive? And if we're not, where aren't we competitive? So we can make recommendations about that. And then we wanted to try to reestablish a competitive market position. As Laura was mentioning, the way you've done it before now with that third, and a third, I feel as though that really put you at a competitive disadvantage to your market peers in some ways. And I understand that there's fiscal realities that we have to deal with in this business, but the fact that you're looking to true things up and go with a, let's call it an organizational-wide approach, I think is brilliant. And I really think it'll put you in a much better position moving forward. So what did we do together? We did a kickoff call at the outset of the engagement. As I said, I came here to meet with your team. We got feedback that way. We did an assessment of current conditions. What goes into how you pay people now? Everything from the ranges to your benefits to the job descriptions and the job titles, and what's the career ladder look like, and how are you progressing people, and everything in between to get a clear understanding of a foundation of what you currently do. And then, as I said, we got to look at the fair and competitiveness piece. So basically, you hired us to do some core things. Survey the market, survey your employees, bring that data together, and then report on it. That's where we find ourselves here today. And then the other thing is the job description update, which was, that's what we'll be doing the next step. So a little bit about compensation philosophy. The desired market position We were told that you wanted to be competitive at the 50th percentile of the market. We'll come back to that a little bit later, but basically that's saying that we don't want to be the highest paid of our market peers. We don't want to be the lowest paid, but we at least want to be at the market average. That would be that 50th percentile, right? So if you had 10 data points, you'd be right there between numbers 5 and 6. We want it to be fair, flexible, and fiscally responsible. We know that you have to be good stewards of taxpayers' dollars, so it's got to be fiscally responsible. We want an open range pay plan, which is what you have currently, that would allow us to have more flexibility, I would say. Allow you to recognize high performers, but also allow you some flexibility. If you're hiring somebody that's bringing some experience with them to the team, you wouldn't be restricted by policy, if you will, to bring them in at a certain step. You'd be able to have a little bit more flexibility. Your leaders would be able to have a little bit more flexibility. And you're going to move employees in your plan based on tenure and performance. Something that I wanted to show you, this is the employee participation piece. So as I said, one of the things that we did is we surveyed all of your employees. Why did we survey your employees? We wanted to have them tell us in their own words what it is that they do here in service to the town, okay? And so we got that information. Right about 60% of employees participated. Supervisor review, what we do is we survey all the employees first, and then we move into a supervisor review. We had excellent participation there. And then I wanted to make sure you paid particular attention to the classification summary piece, that exhibit at the bottom, right at 89%. What does that mean? That means for every single one of the jobs that you have here, the job titles, the job classifications, we received survey data back for. The reason that's important is that helps us get to a defensible recommendation. I'm going to come back to that again when we start talking about the market results, which were extraordinary. So one of the things that you hired us to do was evaluate your benefits. We had market peers that we went to out to market to look for those key benefits offerings. We could identify a lot of those, whether healthcare obviously is going to be key among them. What are the holidays that your different peers are offering on average? What's the sick time accrual? What's the dental and vision plan? All of that stuff, the retirement, everything that goes into that basket of what we would call benefits. There's a couple that we extracted out that we wanted to share with you. I feel as though on the single or individual plan, and I heard this when I was here for outreach, very competitive. You can see over there on the right, the Huntersville PPO plan. I want you to focus in on the percentages, not the dollar amount. The percentages would be more important there. You're covering folks at 100%, so you're slightly ahead of market, and your deductible is also a little bit lower. That's great, okay? Then we add a spouse. I left out the one to add child. That one is as we go from individual up to family, the market position erodes a bit. So here you can see that your peer PPO average for those market peers were right around 76%, and the coverage paid by the employer goes down a little bit that Huntersville's covering. But still, I would say due to the deductible and network, the flexibility that the plan provides, I would still say, you know what, you're competitive to market. We can live with this. If you get the money right, the benefits aren't going to hurt you. This is one that I wanted to make sure you're aware of because more and more I'm hearing about employees making decisions of where they want to work based on the family coverage option. And what is the employer contribution versus what they're going to have to contribute for that plan for those that have a family. And you can see here is an area where the commissioners may want to consider being a little bit more competitive. I could argue that this on average places you at a slight competitive disadvantage. You're at about a 60-40. The market seems to be at about 75-25 as it relates to the employer contribution. So that means your employees for a family plan are paying a little bit more. And look, I get it. I know healthcare costs are going up everywhere. It seems like these companies believe that trees grow to the sky. But the reality is I'm just here to kind of let you know what your market position is. That's what you've hired us to do. This is an area that I can tell you it is becoming more and more important. You don't want to let this erode further. So a couple of other things we'll just kind of throw out there. We don't need to, call for a board action tonight, but just wanted to make you aware of this. Tuition reimbursement is something that I feel very strongly about because it helps you with retention. If you have an employee that is part of an active continuing education program, they're going to get their bachelor's or they're going to get their master's, and it's going to take them a couple years to do that, guess what they're not doing? Not going anywhere else. That's right. You have retained them, right? And so in a market that is as competitive as this labor market is, and as it has been since January 2020, I feel like this is an area where you definitely do not want to have a competitive disadvantage to. So if your market average is 2,800, you want to be at 3. You're not approving any of these things unless it meets with the desired outcomes that you as a board want to drive anyway. And so your senior leadership isn't going to be approving somebody for a, continuing education plan so they can take a trip to Hawaii. Although if they do, I would be willing to go with them to make sure that they learn what they're supposed to learn, all right? But bottom line, this is something that you probably want to look at addressing as well. I talked about the family coverage. The longevity bonus, I think, is outstanding. That is something that provides you a competitive advantage because you're not using it as a supplement to pay a competitive wage. It's a true value add. And if you keep it that way, that will definitely make an impact. Vacation time, we heard a little bit about the vacation time accrual. That may be something that you want to talk to your staff about. In this market, it's becoming more and more important for folks with the work-life balance to make sure that they have opportunities to take leave time early on, and also flexible scheduling. My high-performing organizations that have less of an issue with recruitment and retention, even though it's public sector, a lot of them have a 4-10 setup, or they offer that to some. We actually find that studies are showing that productivity actually goes up, and I just don't know that I've seen an organization that isn't performing at a better level when they allow those type of flexible work schedules, especially if the other members of your market have not caught on yet. If you're the one that's offering it and they're not, it's not bad to be the first one into the pool on that type of stuff. So now let's talk about compensation, okay? And I wanted to give you a couple of slides to kind of give you a general idea of the overall landscape in the United States relative to the labor market. Because since January 2020, it has been nutso. That's a technical term. All right, so if you look at the second to last bullet, I'm going to start there, the one that says consumer price inflation. You've probably heard a lot of employees, you probably heard a lot of your constituents talk about the fact, hey, inflation, everything's getting more expensive, right? Well, there's the data point right there. Basically about 20% is what it's gone up since January 2020. I pulled this last week. Peak inflation, the highest we got to was in June of 2022, about 9%. So if you look at inflation is still a little sticky, all right? The last report that we had come out, I think we got about 150,000 new jobs. Estimates were supposed to be around 275, so we're far behind estimates, but we're still over that 100,000 job number. And typically in America, if we're adding at least 100,000 jobs, then the economy is growing and the labor market's growing. Well, that's good and it's bad if you're in the public sector, because in a very competitive labor market, like you can see with my last bullet, 75% of private sector companies, those CEOs were saying, we're struggling to find new talent, we're going to be more aggressive. What does that mean? They're going to pay more money. So that makes it more difficult for the public sector to compete, right? So you get squeezed there. But then when you have inflation tick up, and you'll see the slide that I'm going to show you here, you'll notice that wages are starting to level off a little bit. So hiring is starting to slow. So the good news is you may have a few additional applicants that you can choose from, but the wage growth is still there. We're 4.5% a year in wage growth still year over year. So the good news is inflation is definitely down significantly. The bad news is it's still sticky and we're nowhere near the Fed target of 2%. So if you can see the trend line, we have wages still continuing to trend up, and in the public sector, that is still true. So basically, as policymakers, that means that the do-nothing option, if you want to stay competitive, is really not on the table. So let's talk about the compensation review and bring it back home here. This was a very strong data set, y'all. All right, we had 20 approved market peers. We got data from 18 of the 20. Of those 18 market peers, for your 84, basically let's call them jobs that we went out to take a look at, job titles, job classifications, we averaged right at 13 matches for every classification that you have. That is a very robust, defensible data set. We did adjust for cost of living for those pays, or for those peers that fall outside of the market. These are the market peers that were approved. How did we come up with this list? We put a bunch of names into a basket and we kind of, no, I'm just kidding. So it started with the kickoff call and then it actually continued on when I came here for outreach. I asked your staff, the people that are on the front lines of trying to recruit the next generation of talent and retain talent, I asked them, who should we be comparing you to? And they told us, along with our own understanding and knowledge of the North Carolina market, we ended up coming up with this list. Ultimately, this list was approved by your project leadership team, and then we solicited these market peers for their current pay data. When we average all of that pay data together, what I'm showing you here is if we took all of those 84 job classifications and we averaged all of the data together, we get to an average position for your overall organization at the minimum, midpoint, and maximum. Well, why is the minimum important? Well, because when you go to post a job, you're going to post it at that minimum range. Hey, if I don't know anything about anything and this is my first time doing this job, you're probably going to pay me the minimum, whatever your minimum range is. Well, on average, your minimum pay ranges were 5% behind the market. Makes it more difficult to get more qualified applicants. Makes it more difficult to fill positions. Where I think you're particularly vulnerable is at the midpoint. Why is the midpoint important? Well, because by the time an employee gets a little bit of experience, a little bit of tenure, they get the required certifications they need, the required licensure they need to have, they become very desirable, especially in a competitive market like the one that you're in. And if you're almost 10% behind market at the midpoint, and I'm willing to make an hour drive from where I am now, then why am I going to stay with an organization where I know I can get a 10% raise within a comfortable commute? And so that's an area that I would urge you to pay attention to as we move forward. Our recommendations will cure these deficits and they will bring you to a market competitive position overall. But I feel like it definitely is something that the market keeps moving. You need to be aware of that and you need to be prepared to adjust every year. So key considerations, as I told the staff when I was here, we're not going to recommend that anyone get a salary decrease as a result of our study. So let's say we went out to market and we found that somebody's being paid $70,000 and the market competitive rate for them was $68,000. I'm not going to come to the commission and say, you know what, you need to cut them by $2,000. All right? No, what we're going to say is that that individual's not going to get an adjustment. So the market's going to catch up with them at some point, okay? But we're not going to recommend they get a reduction. The implementation that we're recommending would align employees into their new pay ranges. So that's how we try to build a pay plan. We take your existing job classifications, we update them based on the essential functions employees are performing, and then we want to place those jobs into market competitive pay ranges. And then we want to take the employees that occupy those jobs and we want to place them within their new market competitive pay range based on some factor. Okay? And so that's what we did here. We want to adopt the new pay plan. As I said, we want to reassign those positions. We want to place employees within it. And we recommend what we call the COMPA ratio. Some of you may be familiar with that. This is the money slide. This is the one that typically everyone wants me to go to first. This is base salary adjusted for cost of living. This doesn't include, all taxes. It doesn't include the benefits costs that we were mentioning earlier. Basically, what this says is the position that an employee had within their existing non-competitive market range, when we move them into the proposed ranges, they would keep their same relative position. So if I was at the midpoint in my current range, when you move me to my new market competitive range, I'm going to stay at the midpoint. One of the reasons for that is we didn't see hardly any instances of wage compression. Just wasn't really pervasive in your organization. So people were being moved, but we felt as though COMPA ratio would be the best way to do it. Now, there's an adjustment factor that's given to that where we're basically prioritizing those employees that would have greater tenure. So the folks that have been hired in the last year or 2 years, well, to fill those positions, let's be honest, you probably had to pay a market competitive wage, right? Or you wouldn't have been able to hire them to start with. And so those folks don't necessarily need to have a big move within their new pay range. And so the adjustment is moderated there to basically about 4%. And we also didn't want to over-reward, if you will, Those employees that have 25, 30 years, we're removing them to the maximum, and you end up with these extraordinary increases. So basically, the max increase of anyone's salary was capped at 15%, regardless of tenure. So basically, what that allows us to do is equitably move and fiscally responsibly move you into a new modernized pay plan where it's market competitive, and it's also, we'd like to hope, is affordable. And so the next steps, this is my last slide here. We're going to write a book for you, basically, where we're going to write a chapter on that assessment of current conditions, what we found. We're going to write a chapter of when I came here and met with your team for outreach. We're going to give you a chapter explaining the benefits work we did, the market salary survey work that we did, and then a recommendations chapter. We find that transparency builds trust, and it allows for everyone to see that the work you've hired us to do, that we did so openly, and that we're willing and 100% comfortable sharing the results of our work. The data is the defense, and it is what it is. And so we put forward that draft report. We're going to train your staff on how to maintain the plan moving forward, and then we're going to update your job descriptions. And now, my favorite slide. There you go. No questions? Good. All right, thank you.
Just one, you said be prepared to adjust every year. How do you do that?
That's a great question. I have so many clients where they'll vote to move themselves to a market competitive position, and then 3 years later we'll come back and they say, okay, we're ready to do another study because, man, we're behind the market. I'm like, well, yeah, the market keeps moving. We talked about inflation, right? If inflation's at 3.5%, if it stays sticky like that for the next 24 months, well, if you don't move anything next year, guess what? You're 3.5% behind market, right? And so I think you need to move two ways. And the recommendation we make to our clients is, one, you have to have a way to adjust based on inflation or some type of index. So I like a 3-year rolling index to where when we have the years like we had in 2022 and we have 8%, you're not giving employees an 8% raise, okay? And the years when we had 1.8% inflation, which you can believe that was only 4 years ago, and you're giving a 3%, you know what I mean? It's kind of a rolling average, if you will. So that helps take care of where are your pay ranges. And then I feel as though merit is very important, where the merit piece is hopefully linked to the desired outcomes of you as policymakers are setting, because those can change. So let's say growth becomes important to you and you want to reduce the amount of time that it takes to process a permit. You want to improve speed to market. Well, maybe you would base the prioritizing the annual review toward that for those respective departments. That, hey, we're going to measure that. We found out that you're at 10 days, or like when I was here for outreach, they said used to it would take us 1 day to evaluate, I think, a set of plans or get a permit processed. And now because they're so busy, it's taking them 3 days on average, right? So you may want to see that reduced. That could be a way that you could tie it to merit, where you're measuring something, and if they meet these metrics, then that employee is going to be able to get that additional amount. So you're doing cost of living as well as merit. And let's say that's somewhere between 3 and 5% total, or 3 and 6% total. Then you as policymakers could dictate what's that percentage allocation going to look like. Yeah, good question.
One of the slides, you noted allow vacation time on the first day of employment. Do we pay employees for vacation time that they don't use? Because my question would be, if a person's on probation and they'll last 3 weeks, how will we compensate that person for vacation time?
I think if you're within the first 30 days, I think first of all, your probationary period should be staggered. What we're finding is that the new generation, because they basically got a ribbon for participation and they won a lot of awards when they were growing up, they expect a lot of recognition and a lot of change early on. So I'm recommending to my clients that in the first 6 months, you're giving a minimum of 2 increases. And as far as the time away goes, is I would say that the time would be available and you start accruing it on the first day, which some organizations do and some don't. But that if somebody wants to take a day off within the first week and they haven't accrued any time, then that's going to be an unpaid day off. But another option you could do is you do load time in when they start. And you could make that a policy change where you could say, look, we're going to, in your first day of employment, you'll have 2 days off. It doesn't change the total amount that gets allocated, right, throughout the course of the year. So whatever your normal accrual is throughout the course of the year and the number of hours that an employee gets toward that vacation accrual or PTO accrual every pay period, that remains the same. But it might be just as simple as we're going to, start you off with 10 or 12 hours or whatever it might be on your first day of employment. Yeah, there could be some bad actors where you made a bad hiring decision and they might try to take advantage of that in the first 30 days. Probably the worst thing that happens there is you're going to identify that poor performer and you'll be able to move them up or out sooner. The best thing that happens, though, is you're going to start to put another credit in the bank, if you will, of it's almost like a demonstration of I care for you as a person and I value the work-life balance here. That, I understand you might not use it, but God forbid you might need it and something might happen in the first month of employment. We want you to know that that's there for you.
Hey, thanks. So you mentioned a couple of suggestions in your presentation that were more benefit oriented, like the tuition, increasing tuition reimbursement. Well, I've got 4 that I wrote down: the family coverage, tuition reimbursement, vacation time accrual, and then the flexible scheduling. Now, when I get this type of question I'm about to ask you, I don't like it, so I apologize. But if you were to pick one of those as either a starting point or only one to make a change on, do you have a recommendation of which one? Family coverage?
And believe it or not, the 4-hour or the 4-10s, it's an unbelievable retention tool. But more than that, what we're finding is that cities and counties, because of the inability to get fully staffed, because of the labor market we're in, they're doing more with less. And in areas that are growing rapidly, whether it be with population or a lot of construction, that's even more so. And so having the ability to have that extra day is a difference maker. It really is in so many different ways. Now, do you still have to measure? Yes. I mean, I guarantee if you talk to your planning department, they know how long it takes to process a set of plans, right? So if we rolled to 4-10s and you do that on a probationary status and it took us 12 days and now it's taken 14, folks, we got a problem. We're doing 4-10s, now it's taking us longer. I think what you're going to find is it'll go the other way because it does every single time. Every single time. Your lost time accidents will go down. The amount of sick time that people are using goes down. The productivity goes up. Now, the change really mostly is impactful to constituents, to your citizens, those that use the service, because for some departments, that might mean, oh my gosh, you might not be open 5 days a week. How could we possibly do that? I think if it's communicated properly, citizens get used to it, and as long as the service levels are there and the speed to market is there or improving, that doesn't necessarily become a bad thing. But those are all the things that have to be weighed out if you're rolling that out. So long answer to your question, but I'd say family coverage. If you notice that the makeup of the folks using your insurance, that family coverage is a minority, then I would go with the 4-10s. There's a cascade effect to the 4-10s. It makes a lot of things better.
That's good insight. Thank you. The other question that I had is I didn't hear mention of working remotely as a suggestion or as really brought up at all. So I'm curious of where we are today compared to a couple of years ago, where that factors in, especially in terms of attracting employees.
Yeah, staff can speak to the overall numbers of where you are with remote work. I could just comment on what I see in the public sector is that it is a divisive issue. 4-10s, not so much. If I'm working as a engineering tech, or if I'm driving the truck for Public Works, because you can't remote drive a dump truck, you know what I mean? And so there are certain positions where it kind of creates a we-they, where, you get to work remotely, but I got to come in, and yet our leave time is the same. So I've seen some organizations try to do it to where, okay, if you don't have the opportunity to remote work because of your conditions of employment, we'll let you accrue maybe more time off to where you can get that time off another way. But one thing that I've found that's equitable across the board is those 410s. So I really don't suggest remote work for my clients. And if you do have it, there's got to be a policy in place, I feel, to make it equitable. Sure. That's it? I was so close.
I just have one. Did you see any other unique types of benefits from our peers that might be attractive to our staff?
Well, I'm sorry?
Did you see any other unique types of benefits that would be attractive to staff? Like, I'm just thinking of some places have like funds for like helping people with adoption, or, do you know what I'm saying? Like these different types of benefits. Like, did you happen to see any of those, and would they be attractive?
Leave, paternal leave, I've seen, the organizations that offer that are more robust with that. That's definitely a difference maker. A lot of it comes down to recognition as well, non-work related recognition. So you might be recognizing employees for something that a family member did or a child did, or that type of recognition. Aligning holidays with the local school district, that's another one, because, the school district's going to have a holiday off and you're not giving that holiday off. I know that might not be the best example, but we'll just go with it. Then if I'm the parent and my child isn't in school that day, what do I have to do? I got to get daycare, right? Or I got to take a day off, or what have you. So at least if you're aligning those days off with either school district or days that, citizens normally wouldn't be looking for service, because it's a holiday and they're traveling, or something along those lines. So holidays are one that I feel like holidays, tuition reimbursement, the recognition, those are things that there's a big ROI for as much as it costs you, and that's one where I feel like you can separate yourself in the market. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Take about a 10-minute break and then convene at 6 o'clock for our regular meeting.